The slope at Mont Tremblant was perfection, a curated playground of white, blinding powder, designed for those who measure their leisure in digits beyond the comprehension of the average worker. To the elite, a ski resort is not merely a place for sport. It is an extension of their personal brand, a stage where the scenery is as meticulously managed as their public image. On March 16, 2009, Natasha Richardson, the refined, ethereal scion of the legendary Redgrave acting dynasty, stepped onto that stage, draped in designer gear that cost more than a mid-range sedan. She carried herself with the effortless grace of someone who had spent her entire existence under protective, soft-focused lens of privilege. In her world, problems were solved by assistants, legal teams, or publicists. A tumble was merely a narrative blip. When she slipped on that beginner slope, the reaction wasn't one of fear. It was one of performance. She stood up, brushed the snow from her expensive attire, and laughed. It was a laugh that radiated confidence, a laugh that signaled to bystanders that she was, and would always be, in control. She waved away the medics who approached with clinical concern. Why would royalty, even the acting royalty of the British stage, require help for a mundane spill? The arrogance of the elite is not always loud or aggressive. Often, it is this, the quiet, absolute certainty that the world, including the laws of physics and biology, will bend to accommodate your comfort. Natasha Richardson was a woman who possessed everything that mattered in the ecosystem of high society. She had the bloodline, a pedigree that stretched back to the pillars of British theater. She had the talent, a nuanced, intellectual capability that earned her critical acclaim. She had the marriage, a partnership with Liam Neeson that was, in the public eye, the gold standard of stability in a sea of Hollywood chaos. She was by all accounts untouchable, and in that, she was also perfectly conditioned to ignore the most primal of human signals: pain. When you have been raised to believe that your composure is your greatest asset, you learn to suppress the warning lights flashing inside your own skull. The silence of that morning at the resort was not peaceful. It was indifferent. As she declined medical intervention, a bureaucratic machine of luxury began to hum in the background, a machine that prioritized the flow of the resort over the health of a guest. The resort staff, trained to be invisible and agreeable, accepted her refusal without a second glance. They saw a high-profile guest exercise in her agency, not a woman suffering from an epidural hematoma, a slow, creeping death that was already beginning to unfold within the confines of her skull. It is a chilling irony. The very structures built to isolate the wealthy from the inconveniences of ordinary life were the ones that failed to protect her when she was most vulnerable. Think about the psychological conditioning required to laugh off a head injury, while a silent, lethal process is in motion. It is the pinnacle of the stiff upper lip, a cultural relic that has been weaponized by the upper class to ensure that even in the face of catastrophe, they remain poised, polite, and above the fray. Natasha's life was an exercise in managing expectations, and even in her final hours of mobility, she performed that role to perfection. She was not a patient. She was a guest. She was not a woman in danger. She was a celebrity enjoying a holiday. The disconnect between her internal reality and her external persona was absolute. This is the central theme of the Redgrave tragedy, the crushing weight of legacy. Being a Redgrave meant that you were expected to be a vessel for artistic excellence, a figurehead of culture, and a monument of endurance. To falter was to break the spell. To express weakness was to risk the integrity of the myth. Even as her brain began to swell, even as the pressure against her cranium intensified, she likely filtered the pain through a lifetime of habit. The habit of enduring, of hiding, of maintaining the facade of the untouchable. She was a master of the stage, and she treated her own mortal emergency as just another scene to be navigated with grace. As we pull back the curtain on this narrative, we see a disturbing portrait of systemic failure. The medical system she encountered was not designed to handle a sudden, high-stakes emergency involving a celebrity. It was designed to cater to their comfort. When she arrived at the hospital, the confusion, the delays, the logistical inertia, these are not anomalies. These are the characteristics of an environment that does not know how to view a VIP as a human being in crisis. They saw the prestige, the history, the famous surname, and they were paralyzed by the very weight of who she was. The irony is as sharp as a scalpel. The fame that provided her with access to the best also blinded everyone around her to the necessity of immediate, aggressive action. Consider the optics. A celebrity on a slope, a minor fall, a refusal of care, a return to the hotel. The sequence sounds almost farcical, like a dark, satirical sketch about the hubris of the rich. Yet, this was a trajectory toward a tragic, irreversible end. Each step she took back to her room, each interaction she had with staff, every moment of solitude she spent in her suite while the hematoma silently expanded, serves as a testament to the fatal flaw of living in a bubble of extreme privilege. She was surrounded by everything money could buy, yet she was utterly alone in the face of her own biology. The tragedy of Natasha Richardson is not just the loss of a brilliant artist. It is the exposure of fragile reality that the elite attempt to hide. It is a reminder that for all the prestige and all the pedigree, death is the great democratic equalizer. It does not pause for a famous name. It does not check your resume. It does not care about your legacy or your next project. It simply arrives, and the speed of its arrival is often hastened by the very things we believe protect us. Our ego, our status, and the systems that exist to serve them. As she retreated into that room at the Mont Tremblant Hotel, the stage was set for a descent that would shock the world. The world saw a glamorous actress having a dream life. In reality, she was living out a nightmare of physiological containment. The tragedy is that everyone around her, and perhaps even she herself, believed the illusion of invincibility. They believed that because she was a Redgrave, because she was protected by the velvet ropes of celebrity, she would simply recover. They were wrong, and in that error, they allowed a life of immense potential to be extinguished by a series of small, polite, and deadly mistakes. We must ask ourselves, what does it mean to be untouchable? Is it a shield or is it a cage? For Natasha, it was both. It was a cage of expectations, a cage of social graces, and a cage of mismanaged attention. As she rested, perhaps believing that the headache would pass and the day would continue, the clock was ticking, not in minutes, but in the slow, rhythmic pulses of a blood vessel that had failed. The world outside remained blissfully unaware of catastrophe, unfolding in the quiet of a high-end suite. The irony is total. The tragedy is complete. And the lesson is one that the elite will never truly learn. That the higher you are, the harder you hit when gravity finally claims its due. The tragedy in the suite at Mont Tremblant was not merely a biological event. It was a breakdown of the social contract that the elite believe protects them. When you occupy the upper echelons of society, you operate under the tacit assumption that the world is a service provider designed to mitigate your discomfort. When Natasha Richardson began to experience the symptoms of her injury, the confusion, the disorientation, the physical manifestations of a failing mind, the people surrounding her were not equipped to handle a crisis of this magnitude. They were trained to offer luxury, not life-saving triage. The resort staff, the bystanders, and even the initial medical responders were caught in the gravitational pull of her celebrity, and that pull distorted their judgment. The failure was not one of malice, but of deference. In a society that worships status, the presence of a famous figure induces a paralysis in those who serve them. They are so consumed by the mandate to maintain the perfect experience that they fail to see the human being crumbling before them. This is the dark side of high-profile existence. You are so obscured by your own brand that you are no longer recognized as a person capable of suffering. The medics who left her suite, the staff who accepted her refusal care, they all fell victim to the aura of the Redgrave name. They assumed that someone of her stature, someone so composed and articulate, could not possibly be in the midst of fatal neurological decline. This is a central paradox of the VIP experience. The very privilege that grants you access to the finest treatment in the world is the same thing that blocks that treatment when it is most needed. By the time the reality of her condition penetrated the layers of bureaucracy and celebrity insulation, the damage was already catastrophic. The medical system she encountered was not designed for the speed of an epidural hematoma. It was designed to accommodate the slow, polite pace of a luxury holiday. When the severity of the situation finally registered, the logistical nightmare began. The delays, the transfers, the frantic scramble for a specialized neurological facility. These were the frantic attempts to fix a reality that had already outrun the comfort of her station. Consider the optics of that final, desperate transition. From the glamorous, snow-dusted slopes of a premier resort to the sterile, flickering lights of an emergency room in Montreal, the trajectory was one of sudden, jarring descent. The elite tried to curate their lives to exclude the visceral, ugly realities of mortality, but in that moment, the curation failed. The untouchable was now subject to the same clinical indifference as any other patient in a crowded system. The fame that had paved her path with gold for decades offered her no immunity against the cold, hard logic of medical error and geographical distance. The management of her public persona, even during her final hours, is a testament to the cage she lived in. The world was shielded from the truth until it could no longer be denied. The publicists, the inner circle, the machine that had spent years cultivating her image as a beacon of stability and grace, were suddenly forced to grapple with a narrative they could not spin. The silence that followed her fall was not a private mourning. It was societal holding a breath, a collective realization that the myth of the invincible celebrity had been shattered. When you are constantly performing for an audience, even your death becomes a piece of public theater, a final act in a play that the world had been watching for years. The system did not fail because it lacked resources. It failed because it lacked humanity. It was blinded by the prestige that Natasha carried with her, a prestige that functioned as a filter, removing the urgency from her situation and replacing it with polite, deferential caution. The people around her treated her as an icon, and because they treated her as an icon, they failed to treat her as a patient. The hierarchy of social standing became a lethal barrier. They could not imagine that the woman standing before them, with all the resources of her world, could be so fragile, so mortal, and so rapidly fading. It is a chilling reflection on the nature of our society. We build these pedestals for our idols. We surround them with velvet ropes and buffers of staff. And in doing so, we isolate them from the very things that keep us grounded, the ability to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood in our moments of greatest need. The tragedy of Natasha Richardson is a brutal reminder that the higher you are, the more distance there is between you and reality of the human condition. When the fall finally comes, and it always comes, the distance is too great, and the shock of impact is too severe to survive. As we examine the wreckage of those hours, we see that the systems designed to maintain the perfect lives of the elite are, in truth, systems of total exposure. They provide no safety net. They only provide a platform for a more spectacular fall. The tragedy is that everyone involved was playing their role perfectly. The actress, the staff, the medics, and yet the result was catastrophe. The perfection of the role was the cause of the destruction. And in that, there is a lesson that echoes long after the lights of the stage have dimmed. The price of being untouchable is the loss of the ability to be saved. We have traversed the climb and witnessed the collapse. Now, we must confront the final, unsettling reality, the aftermath, when an icon like Natasha Richardson is dismantled by a sudden, fatal encounter with reality. The world does not just mourn. It begins a mechanical process of legacy management. This is the point where the human tragedy is strip mined for cultural capital, and the memory of the individual is sanitized to fit the demands of a public that prefers its heroes to be perfect, even in death. Observe how the machine immediately pivots. The private horror of the hospital room is replaced by the curated narrative of the public statement. The privacy that was demanded by the inner circle is not for the sake of the departed, but for the preservation of the brand. Every obituary, every retrospective feature, and every mournful tribute is a calculated transaction. The industry that once profited from her vibrant vitality now profits from the gravitas of her demise. It is a macabre yet efficient form of recycling. The personality, the talent, the lineage, all are repackaged into a legacy that serves the needs of the living rather than the truth of the one who is gone. This is the forensic autopsy of fame. When we deconstruct the way the media and the public react to such a loss, we see a disturbing reflection of our own appetites. We do not want to see the messiness of a brain hemorrhage. We want the elegant, tragic portrait of a life cut short. We demand that the ending be consistent with the character they played on screen. And so, the machine complies. It smooths out the edges, hides the logistical failures, and frames the event as a cruel twist of fate, a tragic accident, rather than a structural failure of a system that treats VIPs with a specialized lethal negligence. The irony is profound. Natasha Richardson spent her life navigating the pressures of a dynasty that demanded excellence, only to be betrayed by a system that demanded deference. In death, she is finally granted the safety that eluded her in the snow. She is frozen in time, rendered an immortal figure whose human fragility is scrubbed away in favor of a timeless, untouchable image. The very thing she was during her life, a person of immense talent and complexity, is sacrificed at the altar of her own myth. Think of the families who endure similar tragedies without the buffer of wealth or the shield of fame. They are left to deal with the raw, unpolished, and devastating reality of loss, without the benefit of a PR team to soften the blow. For them, there is no legacy management. There's only the agonizing, incremental process of grief. By contrasting these two experiences, we see the true cost of the elite bubble. It is not just that the elite are insulated from the world. It is that they are denied the authenticity of a human experience, even at the point of exit. In the final analysis, the story of Natasha Richardson is not a cautionary tale about skiing or safety gear. It is a story about the absolute corrosive power of status. It is a story about how we, the observers, participate in the dehumanization of those we elevate. We watch them as if they're characters in a play. And when the curtain falls, we are shocked, saddened, and eventually indifferent. We move on to the next act, the next star, the next tragic cycle. The machine of Society Noir and the wider machinery of global celebrity culture will continue to churn. New icons will rise. They will be draped in the velvet of privilege. They will be surrounded by the sycophants of the system, and they will inevitably be vulnerable to the same traps of indifference. The lesson is not that we should pity the elite. The lesson is that we should recognize the mechanism. We should see the structure for what it is, a giant gilded and entirely hollow stage where performance is always prioritized over the life. As we close this file, let us look at the image of the star one last time, not as an object of adoration, but as a subject, an experiment that ended in ruin. The silence that fills the room now is not just for her. It is for the realization that we all live in a society that is perfectly comfortable with this outcome. We have built a world where the highest form of success is to be truly, utterly untouchable. And we have finally understood that the most expensive way to be untouchable is to have absolutely no one left who can actually reach you when it matters. The file on Natasha Richardson is now closed. The system, however, remains hungry.